College. What it's worth, what we value. The story goes like this. U.S. President James Garfield, Williams' class of 1856, was speaking to fellow alumni in a New York City restaurant in 1871 when he said, "The ideal college is Mark Hopkins on one end of a log and a student on the other." Mark Hopkins, class of 1824, spent more than 50 years at Williams as a student, professor, and president. The essence of that log story, teachers and students working together closely, intensely, and in small numbers, remains central to Williams. While it may sound simple, it's definitely not cheap. This year, we'll spend about $100,000 on each of our students. How are we spending $200 million? Essentially on three things: people, buildings, and stuff. First, the people. Let's go back to Mark Hopkins and the log. Even then, even if the log were free, this would have been wildly expensive. A professor for each student? We don't have a professor for each student. We know that a high-quality education involves interacting with faculty who teach a variety of subjects, as well as with other students. But we know that keeping the numbers small makes a big difference, and so we spend a lot to do that. We have the lowest student-faculty ratio in the country. This year, we'll spend about $60,000 per student on faculty and staff. $25,000 of that is for salary and benefits for 364 professors and coaches. We hire faculty who want to teach and who want to play significant roles in students' lives, teaching small classes, being active on campus and in the intellectual community, advising students and helping them grow as thinkers and as people. Williams students form meaningful relationships with professors and coaches that shape their education and often last a lifetime. And we have a lot of staff members because they provide for the safety and well-being of our students, and they're mentors and sources of support for students too. Support that's pretty all-encompassing given Williams' location in a small rural community. Creating conditions ripe for the growth we expect of our students requires great investment and the hard work of a whole lot of people. So this year, we'll spend about $35,000 per student on salary and benefits for staff. Now, for the buildings. A student can't sit on a log for 4 years, so we need buildings, and they need to last. This year, we'll spend about $17,000 per student on buildings to put them up and keep them up. Philanthropy actually pays for the bulk of any new buildings, which this year include a long-awaited new central library and a revamped sports complex. Then there's the stuff. Mark Hopkins and his student would have needed some books. Eventually, they'd have gotten hungry and tired and cold, and a log can only get you so far. We'll spend about $23,000 per student this year on all the stuff that's part of a Williams education. That's our operating budget, and it includes the basics like heat, lights, food, computers, phones, and lab equipment. It also includes the things that bring Williams to the world and the world to Williams, like art exhibitions, student travel and research, and guest speakers and performers. Could we spend less? Sure, but something big would have to give. We might have larger classes and less time for faculty to spend with students, or less support for students. Or we might lose our top faculty to colleges that could offer higher salaries, better equipped labs, or a more diverse student population. And remember, no student pays the full cost of a Williams education. At most, they pay about $60,000, and half of our students, those receiving financial aid, pay far less. Overall, what students contribute covers less than 40% of what we're investing in them. We can do that only because of a very healthy endowment and a long history of generous giving from our community. So now you know what we spend and how we spend it. But why do we spend so much? Because ultimately, we aim to provide students with the finest education, not a lavish one, but rather the most durable, flexible, and practical preparation for a full life. We're teaching students to communicate, create, solve problems, adapt, and question, giving them the abilities and the perspective they'll need to make the world better. That's expensive, and it's never been more valuable.